This call is now being recorded.
Right. So morning everyone. Lecture number 18, 210 fluid mechanics. This is going to be a new topic. This is called dimensional analysis. Right. So let's start this discussion with an example. So I'll explain you what this topic contains, starting with this example. So let's say that we are design engineers. We have to design the shape of an aeroplane wing. So let me draw that wing. So we have a wing like this for an aeroplane. Right. So we want to design the shape, etc., shape and size and so on for the wing. And ultimately the wing is going to help provide some sort of a lift to the aeroplane. So our job is to design this airfoil. Airfoil is this shape that we have. So we will want to design some sort of a shape which is the best one for us for the aeroplane wing. Now, in this case, it is not possible to solve the Navier-Stokes equations analytically. So we showed you a couple of examples, for example, for the case of flow between two channels, the Poiseuille flow situation, or the flow when the top channel is moving, the Couette flow situation. So for those situations, we could solve the Navier-Stokes equation, and we could obtain the velocity field everywhere, and hence we could obtain, velocity and pressure fields, and hence we could obtain the forces acting on different bodies. But in this case, we cannot solve it analytically because this is mathematically more complicated than a simple channel. So we know that it is not possible to solve it analytically. Well, at least there's no solution available. So what do we do? Right. So our all that theory that we have developed is not going to be too useful here. Well, there's another technique which is called computational fluid dynamics, which allows us to solve the Navier-Stokes equations computationally. So we can solve the equations computationally. But again, that technique involves a lot of assumptions. And those assumptions may result in a solution which may not be very accurate in some situations. So ultimately, if you want to design an aeroplane, a wing for an aeroplane, and you want to be very sure that the calculations that you are making are going to work for an actual aeroplane, because it's very critical. An aeroplane is going to fly in the air and you can't afford to lose it. So you have to be very sure. So we, along with solving these equations computationally, which have some amount of assumptions in them, we want to do some sort of an experiment to be very sure about it. Okay, to be double sure about these things. So this discussion that we'll have will mainly be focused. I mean, this discussion on dimensional analysis is going to be the other side of the spectrum, that is doing experiments. So one side that we have been talking about is developing theoretical ideas and solving them mathematically. The other spectrum is doing experiments. As we said in the beginning of the course, that fluid mechanics is a mix of both. We have to do both of them, in some cases to be sure about things, in some cases to complement each other. Right. So we are going to talk about experiments. So I'll simply say that computational methods are for not very accurate and complicated. So we do want to do experiments. We have justified that. Now the question is, what do we do? Do we actually make a wing of the size of an aeroplane wing, fitted with an aeroplane, and then do experiments on it, or do we make a wing and this huge wing which has the width or this dimension? Let's call it L. And let's call this as width. So typically an L would be a couple of meters, 3 to 4 meters, and width would be probably 5 to 8 meters or more than that. So do we actually make the wings like this? So if I have 10 contender designs, do I actually manufacture 10 of these wings and do lots and lots of experiments on those? Is that what I'll do? So these are the questions I have to answer. If not, then can we make a scale down model? So one question I have is, okay, so the first question is, can we make a scale down model and experiment on it? I mean, of course we can experiment, but the question is, will the learnings from the model be applicable to the full scale prototype? So if I do an experiment on a miniaturized wing in a wind tunnel or in some water tunnel, then will I be able to whatever I learn? I mean, I can always measure the lift that that miniaturized model is experiencing. Will I be able to apply that learning to a bigger wing? Will How will the scaling laws work if I scale down the model to a miniaturized model? So that's the first question. Does the force become 1/10 if I make the size 1/10, loosely speaking? Does that what happen, or there's something else that is happening here? So one has to learn that. So that's the first question that I want to answer in today's lecture. Okay, the other question is, okay, so well, it's not the other question, it's a follow up from there. Can we make a few candidate models rather than making full scale prototypes, which are extremely expensive to manufacture and test? Okay, so it's a follow up from there. So rather than, I mean, since we are designing the shape and size of a wing, which is ideal for us for an aeroplane, then can I make those candidate designs into those models, small models, and then test on it, and then again apply the learnings onto the bigger one. So I can choose which one works the best, which shape works the best for me using those models, and then make an actual wing and let the aeroplane fly without testing the actual aeroplane to start with. Okay, so these are the questions we want to answer in today's lecture. And any questions on that? Okay, so before I answer this question, let me start with another example, which is an example of dimensional analysis. Okay, so I'll give you some equations without telling you how you get them, and the how part will be done in next week's lecture. Okay, so for the case like this, for the aeroplane that we have talked about, for the aerofoil, from experience. Okay, it's very important, the word experience here. So from experience, we have learned that the lift force, which is FL. So we have a lot of experience with aerofoils for a long time now, because aeroplanes have been here for a long time. So what we've seen is the lift force that acts on an aeroplane wing is a function of a couple of things. So one of them is the length, the L, which is the length of the aerofoil. The other is the flow speed, the stream speed. So the flow is happening across an aerofoil, which is like this. Okay, so V is the stream speed. So it's a function of V as well. Then it's a function of the fluid density and fluid viscosity. So it's only these things on which the lift force depends. Of course, this is for a given design. I mean, of course, if you change the shape of the aerofoil, things will change. So I've fixed the shape for now. I'm not changing the shape. All I'm doing is I'm either making it bigger or smaller. So if I change the L part, everything else scales down or scales up with L. Then it's a function of that dimension L. Okay, L, V, rho, and mu. So that's these are the four things on which the lift force acting on the aerofoil depends. This is from experience. Right. So if we were to do some sort of an actual experiment on the full scale wing, or if we had to understand the behavior of, let's say, a given shape of a wing, all we had to do was we had to do lots of experiments on different values for L, V, rho, and mu. Okay. So lots of experiments. For different values. So let's say 10 values of L. So what I do is I manufacture 10 different wings. So one is the actual size, one is L by 10, one is probably somewhere between L by 10 and L, and so on. So we will have 10 wing sizes. So that will give me the effect of the L, because then I will do experiment on each of those, and that will give me the lift force as a function of L. Similarly, for each model, I will have 10 different flow streams. So that will be 10 more experiments per length. Then for each flow speed experiment, I'll have 10 different densities. So I can use 10 different fluids. And for each density, I will have 10 different viscosities, if at all that was possible to get those fluids. So I'll have 10 to the power of 4 experiments, because 10 lengths, 10 velocities, 10 densities, 10 viscosities. So let's say 10 each. That's just an approximate number. So this will result in 10,000 experiments to get the function f. It's like if you want to plot a curve, you need 10 points, and then you will join them smoothly to get the curve. To get the function f, you will do 10,000 experiments, and you will be able to get the lift force as a function of these 4 variables. And that is all. I mean, if you can tabulate that, then your job is done for a given shape of aerofoil. Of course, I mean, if you change the shape, then this whole thing will change. But 10,000 experiments is a lot of experiments. I mean, imagine the cost associated with that. If one experiment was approximately 20,000 rupees, well, it depends, because if you have to manufacture a new wing, that part will be very expensive. But changing the flow speed may not be that expensive. But then changing a fluid may be expensive, and doing the whole experiment will require you some man hours and so on. So it may be very expensive to do an experiment. So if it was, let's say, 10,000 rupees an experiment, then we're talking about many lakhs of rupees being spent simply on doing getting this functional form. So you can see that it's very expensive, but one has to do that. I mean, there's no other solution available to be able to understand the functional form altogether. So then again, we are at a point as to what do we do? But there is something that we can actually do that will save a lot of time and money. And that is the whole idea of having dimensional analysis. So using the ideas of dimensional analysis, I mean, I'll tell you how to do this in the next lecture, but just show you the results. So using these ideas, we can simplify the relationship between force, lift force, and the 4 variables into simply 2 variables. So using the amazing ideas of dimensional analysis that you will learn soon, we can simply write the ratio of lift force to rho v square L square is some function, not f, but some, let's say f1, some other function of a quantity which is rho v L by mu. It still has those 5 variables in it. You still have your lift force, you still have your length, you still have your velocity, you still have your density, you still have your viscosity. They're all there. But we have arranged them in such a way so that now the relationship is only between 2 quantities. Okay, I can actually tell you what these quantities are called. They have a name. So this thing is called the lift coefficient. And this thing is called the Reynolds number. Okay, so CL is a function of RE. So all this comes from dimensional analysis concepts, which we learn soon. But this makes our life much easier. Okay, so now what we know is that CL depends only on Reynolds number. So what I can do is I can only do 10 experiments now for 10 different values of Reynolds number, because ultimately I have to plot this curve only. So it's a simple 2D curve. For different values of RE on the x-axis, I'll get different values of CL on the y-axis. So all I need is RE versus CL. Okay, so if I can get some sort of relationship between these points, then I have got everything I need. So now we only need 10 experiments instead of 10,000. So that's made our life extremely easy. Is that clear? And this graph contains all the information we need. Okay, all that behavior between force and the 4 variables is there, because we already have shown that the behavior can be condensed into simply a relation between CL and RE. Okay, what I mean, let's understand this a bit more. So what this relationship is telling us is, as long as RE, the Reynolds number, I mean, for a given design of the aerofoil is the same, then the lift coefficient will always be the same. Okay, because the relationship is only between RE and CL, and RE was rho V L by mu. So what it means is, if I decrease my length by a factor of 10, if I do the experiment on a smaller model, then to get the same lift coefficient, I will have to increase the velocity by 10 times. If I do that, if I increase the velocity by 10 times and decrease the length by 10 times, I get the same Reynolds number. So my lift coefficient CL will be the same. Okay, so this should be RE. Okay, so this allows us to do the testing on scaled down models. Okay, so this functional relationship, this F1, still has to be found out through experiments. I mean, this dimensional analysis does not give us the function. Okay, the word suggests it's only talking about dimensions. It's talking about some ratios. It is not talking about the actual functional relationship. So that has to be found out. Okay, so let's take an example of an actual design situation, and then we will understand this process a bit further with the same aerofoil wing case. So let's say that we have a wing. We want to find the lift force. We want to find So we want to find the lift force in an aerofoil wing design when it is flying at 200 meters per second. Okay, so an actual aeroplane, you would expect it to fly at around this speed. So if my aeroplane is flying at 200 meters per second, and I have a wing design in mind, I would want to find out the lift force that acts on it. Okay, I just want to find that one point on the CL versus RE graph, because I would want to fly my actual wing at that aeroplane at that speed of 200 meters per second. So I want to know how much of a lift force will that aerofoil wing generate. Okay, so one way was, if you had lots of money and if you had lots of money, you could just manufacture the full wing and do the experiment in a huge wind tunnel. But again, you don't have that much money. So, and you know the ideas of dimensional analysis. So what you'll do is you will do testing on model and learn from that. So let's see what the value of Reynolds number is for the prototype. So this full scale stuff is called prototype. So the Reynolds number for the prototype is rho prototype V prototype L prototype by mu prototype. Okay, well, I don't need to calculate it. I just I'll compare the Reynolds number for the prototype and the model. Okay, now the model that we want to miniaturize and test in the lab, let us say its size is 1/100th of the prototype size. So if your prototype actually was 5 meters of the length of the aerofoil, then you're talking about 5 centimeters of the experiment. So, around 5 centimeters is what you will make. And that's quite reasonable. I mean, making a 5 centimeters, let's say, wing using some sort of 3D printing is quite reasonable. So you want to choose a model which is 1/100th of the actual prototype size in this case. So if we do that, then remember that to be able to have the similar conditions, you need the same Reynolds number, because the lift force is going to be the lift coefficient is a function of Reynolds number. So if I want to get similar working conditions for the scaled down model, then this Reynolds number has to be the same for both cases. Reynolds number for the model so let's calculate it. Let us say that I end up choosing the same fluid. So the density of the model is the same as density of prototype. So we use air again in this case. Velocity of the model is still not known. We don't know how fast we should let the fluid flow. L model is LP upon 100. and then we have mu model equal to mu prototype. Okay. So what we see is that if we need REM equal to RE prototype, then we need V model equal to V prototype times 100. Okay, that does not sound reasonable. I mean, we're talking about 200 meters per second, and you are saying now this analysis is telling us that to have the same Reynolds number, I would need 20,000 meters per second. Of course, there's no way you can create 20,000 meters per second in a lab for the flow velocity of air. Okay, so what do we do? Any suggestions? Okay, you think about it. I will be back in a minute, and think. I mean, we're talking about engineers here, so you have to come up with ideas so that the Reynolds number for both the prototype and the model are the same. Any ideas?
Hello.
Yes, Davyam.
Yes, sir, we can change the other properties in such a way that the V model and V prototype factors are is less than 100. Like
Right,
we
that's
can change
correct.
density or viscosity.
Perfect. So you're right. So we have to change something else, and that something else is the density and the viscosity. So that means we have to change the fluid. Okay. So let's. What other fluid can we try? We can try water. So let's try water. So density of the model. So we are using water in the model, and density of water is 1000 times the density of the air. So I'll write rho m as 1000 times rho prototype. Then, well, V model has to be found out, and L model is L prototype upon 100. That is something we chose. And the viscosity of water is 100 times the viscosity of air. So this becomes 100 times mu prototype. Okay, so let's see what we get here. So we get rho p Vm Lp upon 10. Is that right? Okay, we still are in a bit of a trouble because what's happened is we have, let me check my calculations again. So density of water is 1000 times density of air, and viscosity of water is 100 times the viscosity of air, right? So that gives us a factor of 10. So we still have a factor of 10. So we still need um, 2000 meters per second. Okay. So we're still talking about higher velocity than expected. So we have to choose some other fluid which has got the ratio of its density to viscosity, which gives us a factor of, let's say, around instead of 10, it gives us a factor of 10 on the numerator. So that will end up reducing the velocity to only 20 meters per second. Okay, so I'm sure you get the idea here that we have to choose some other properties in such a way so that the Reynolds number is the same. Because the idea of scaling down, the idea of similarity will only work if your Reynolds number is the same for both the model and the prototype. Okay. So in this Reynolds number versus the lift coefficient relationship that let's say we have some points here that we have measured. Now let's say that the Reynolds number that we are operating at, or we want to operate at for the prototype for the aeroplane, is this much. So we made sure that the same Reynolds number was obtained for the model as well by changing the fluid type and by changing the flow speeds and miniaturizing the model. So once we do that, then in the model we'll be able to measure the lift force. In that small model, we'll be able to measure the lift force by putting some sensors. We have to hold the wing, so how much force, vertical force, has to be applied on the wing to hold it will be equal to the lift force. So let's say the lift force on the model is measured. Now we know that since these model and the experiment and the model and the prototype are similar, so the lift coefficient CL for the model has to be equal to the lift coefficient for the prototype, because they are simply a function of Reynolds number. Reynolds number is the same for both model and prototype. Okay. So from this we can write okay. So from this, since now we know the model lift force, that is something we already have measured in the experiment in the lab, and the density of the material for experiment is known. Lm is Lp by 100. Vm is something that we calculated based on equating Reynolds number, and rho p, Vp, and Lp are also known. So from this, we can now calculate our force on the actual full-scale wing. So this technique allowed us to calculate or to find the force on a full-scale wing by doing an experiment on a miniaturized wing. That's the amazing part of dimensional analysis. Any questions? Right. Good. So we now understand that this relationship, which was lift force, is a function of L, V, rho, and mu, was simplified. Well, to this relationship. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we go from this relationship of 5 variables to relationship between 2 variables? Okay, so this is what is the whole stuff that we're going to learn in this discussion on dimensional analysis. So for that, we have a theorem. I will state the theorem today and I will discuss it in the next lecture. So the theorem is called Buckingham pi theorem. Okay, this pi has nothing to do with 3.1415, the irrational number pi. Okay. This pi actually is related to the letter pi, which is also used for product. Okay, so we have product of multiple variables. That is the reason we use the word pi here. So it's called Buckingham pi theorem. So let me state the theorem. So in a problem, if you have n number of dimensional variables, okay. So in the previous example, we had 6. Sorry, we had 5. So we had 5 dimensional variables, which was FL, L, the length, the velocity V, the density rho, and viscosity mu. Okay, and we have J fundamental dimensions which are needed to describe these variables. Okay, so in this case, if you see all the variables, then the fundamental dimensions you need are mass, length, and time. Okay, so J is equal to 3 in the previous example. Okay, you can also have a temperature, that is theta, but in the previous example we did there is no quantity out of those 5 which depended on theta. Okay, so the number of fundamental dimensions which were needed to describe these n variables, or these 5 variables, were m, l, and t. So J is equal to 3. So if this is the case, then the theorem says so we can reduce the number of variables in the problem to n minus j dimensionless pi parameters. So n in the previous case was 5 and j was 3. So using the theorem, we can reduce the number of variables to only 2 variables. So we'll call this pi 1 and pi 2. Well, in a general case, we'll have this till pi n minus j. So we only had pi 1 and pi 2 in the previous example. So pi 1 was CL and pi 2 was RE, and they are both dimensionless parameters. Okay, their dimension is 1. Okay, so this is what the theorem says. It's a very strong theorem. And the other part of the theorem, it tells us how to find these pi 1 and pi 2, or pi parameters. Okay, so we will stop here now, and in the next lecture I will tell you how to use this theorem and find out these pi parameters for different cases. So we'll do many examples in the next lecture to get comfortable with using the theorem in real examples. Okay, I'll stop the recording now, and in case anybody has a question, feel free to ask, sorry.